Hello and welcome to the Job Hunter podcast, the only show that takes a deep dive into some of the UK's most interesting professions. I'm your host Tim French, and this week we'll be taking a look into one of football's most controversial innovations. Our next guest will be on hand to help answer some of your frustrations, as well as explaining what goes into ensuring it was a goal or whether or not it was indeed offside. So sit back, relax, as we find out more about goal line technology and ball tracking on the Job Hunter podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Job Hunter podcast. Today we'll be casting a keen gaze towards today's guest. I'm hoping my questions don't get caught for offside, as I'm delighted to be joined with Conor Browne, UK training lead for Hawkeye Football UK. Welcome, Conor. First off, what exactly is Hawkeye?
Hey, Tim. Yeah, good question. So Hawkeye Innovations is a sports technology company that started around, I think it'd be in about the early 2000s, but the technology started getting worked on the mid-90s by a man called Paul Hawkins. And the idea behind it was to do trajectory-based tracking on balls, essentially, and various projectiles, and implement it into, originally the idea was to implement it into, I believe he was going for tennis. But then what then eventually happened was that it got picked up by cricket first, I believe. So around the 2001 mark, these dates could be slightly off. And then the following year, it then got picked up by tennis. And so what the technology was essentially used for was tracking balls to see whether they were online for stump, for like out in cricket, or whether they were going to be in or out in tennis. Because what it used trajectory-based tracking in a 3D space. And these projectiles, were they going to be out or not, depending on like this kind of trajectory that was tracked via the system. It then kind of exploded. I think if you're a cricket or a tennis fan, the words Hawkeye are quite synonymous with the sport. It's very widely known in those sports, and it is called Hawkeye. It is a big brand. Then we started to move into a lot of other sports, as well as other areas of technology. Still the main crux of it for a while, still being the kind of that ball tracking system. And then for me personally, what's relevant to me in 2012, 2013, it got introduced into the footballing world in the Premier League. And the main there was a few things that was kind of political things that were happening at the time, because there'd been a lot of resistance. They'd been ready to kind of implement it into football from about the 2010 era, and it actually ended up kind of being put to the side. It's like, it's the traditional game, and they just didn't want anyone's kind of fingers in the pie. And then we had England had that incident where Frank Lampard had clearly scored.
I was going to mention that later.
Yeah, sorry. And that, amongst other things, helped push us forward. High profile cases, and that's kind of goes to show you that even with something as robust as Hawkeye and how well they were doing in tennis, in cricket they still needed those kind of extra pressures to kind of push, like this kind of like people who are just kind of stuck in a mindset of like things need to be this way because this is how they've always been, and that kind of like resistance to change. So yeah, we came into football around the 2012 2013 kind of era, and since then it's been growing massively, and the things we do aren't just ball tracking anymore. We do we provide graphics, we do replay systems for IMG Studios, we do analyst and medical services, ball tracking, and obviously the big one, video assistant referee for some, well, big one for certain sets of fans. I'd still say the ball tracking stuff is still big for like your cricket and your tennis, etc. And I think it was in 2012 as well, Hawkeye got then moved under the Sony Europe branch. So now we're actually a subsidiary of Sony Corporation. But yeah, that is in a brief nutshell, Hawkeye Innovations.
So kind of dumbing it down, you essentially, you have computers have cameras that can monitor the flight of a ball and be able to determine based on where it is in space whether or not that's okay or not effectively. How exactly do you do that?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick topology of it. So for the ball tracking side of things, without going into the numbers, we have a various set array of cameras, and I'll use football as the example. So at a goal, at this goalpost, we have a set number of cameras all pointed at that goal face. And what they're doing is they're each a 2D image. And like our eyes, each eye being a 2D image, by combining those 2D images, we can create a 3D space by using this set origin point. So you obviously have your X and your Y, but then you have a separate X and Y from a different location, and that can create your Z axis, which gives you that third axis, and they all just come off that 0, 0, 0 point. And you have these cameras working in a system which are always trying to find a set ball, and this will be done via pixel recognition. And whilst obviously in tennis and cricket the balls are very kind of plain, and occasionally they might be pink, in football they're very defined patterns. So it's obviously looking for a very defined pattern on a certain ball, and it's going, right, okay, can I find this ball in this 2D image, and can this other camera find it? And if the one camera finds it, it goes, oh, I think I found it. And then another camera goes, oh, let's see if we can see that camera on that exact same point. And then they find it, and then they all start to agree with each other. And that's all done via pixel recognition and like machine learning. So this is as we do more and more like kind of testing pre-season and stuff, that machine learning becomes stronger and stronger. And then eventually you get to a point where the system's just like, yeah, that's 100% the ball. I can see it, like it's right there. And it's incredible that kind of like that how far machine learning's come, because obviously people are kind of afraid of that kind of artificial intelligence, thinking it's going to take over the world. But in reality, it's just more about kind of being able to let the programming to be able to actually just like track those kind of more mundane tasks, if you know what I mean. Like they're not going to be able to, not quite ready to take over the world yet, but they can see a ball a mile off.
And they can think quicker than us, right? That's the whole benefit compared to a person that potentially will only ever see it once in their life, and that's it. They can't compute it quickly enough to see what's happened, whereas it's happening milliseconds, microseconds.
For sure. And I think it's all about the kind of, it goes hand in hand, because with the machine learning, you still need a human input to begin with to help the system learn what the balls are, because to begin with, they don't know much at all. They just kind of know the rough pattern that they're looking for, but it goes through as it gets generated through this software. Without going into too much detail, don't want to give all the ideas away. But yeah, and so that in a brief nutshell, that is the overall topology of kind of how the basic tracking system works. That then is also then put into like graphics that we then overlay for TV, and that's various softwares communicating with one another so that we can then just output that straight to TV using like broadcast cameras. So that obviously then kind of leads into that whole relationship with that we're not just working in a technology space, we're also working in the broadcast space as well, which we're becoming more and more heavily involved with, and especially with our kind of like introduction of graphics, and also going into like the kind of player tracking side of things as well, which is also very heavy on the machine learning, especially for things like limb tracking.
So you've obviously mentioned that it started out in the Premier League. It's yet to be adopted by the rest of the lower tiers, isn't it, at the moment?
No, so actually, goal line technology is in. If I'm going to go, I'll just briefly go over the ones in Europe. We have it in the EFL Championship, so that's the tier below the Premier League. We have it in the Premier League. We have it in La Liga. We have it in Serie A, and we have it in the Bundesliga in Germany. And then on top of that, we then also provide VAR to a lot more countries, just purely because that is based off the idea of that we're able to then integrate with broadcast to do that. And we have a number of different ways of coming to that solution.
So how is Hawkeye different from, say, the TMO kind of, because that's a more physical assistant referee, isn't it, in rugby? How is like VAR and that technology beneficial again over someone else just reviewing replay footage? So
with the interesting thing about that is that Hawkeye have provided like kind of their own TMO for even sports like rugby. And in a situation like rugby, when you're purely just looking at video replay footage, you might start to think, okay, so that's all we need it to do. Like that's just kind of pen and paper there. But with Hawkeye, there's obviously a lot of integration because they're already doing a lot of other stuff that's kind of involved with the sports. So for example, in rugby, we do like medical systems as well, where we provide tablets to the coaching staffs so that when they see like blood subs, concussions, etc., people running on the pitch whilst the doctor's able to actually kind of look through the footage quickly and kind of see if players' like eyes are kind of like rolling in the back of their heads as they've kind of been hit, and they can make that decision a lot quicker. And rather than having 4 or 5 different contractors on site, the RFU are kind of able to go, okay, well, we already use this one contractor for this. They also are able to do this, and they're proven in this sport. Therefore, they're able to then also integrate that system because it's coming from the same place. Because being able to provide angles on a tablet is also then able to provide angles to a screen to the referee. And that's like a very simplified version of it, because in football, there's a lot of other stuff that we're doing. It's not just the VAR and the goal line. There's about 7 or 8 different other services just in the Prem, and then in the UEFA, there's other services that we provide as well.
You obviously mentioned the Frank Lampard incident, shall we say, Berlin 2010, wasn't it? Or was it a Euros? It was Euros. Was it? I can't remember. It was definitely a game of a very contentious episode, if you want to describe it as that. What exactly happened, and why did that create the appetite for Hawkeye that we see now?
So to not go too much into it, because it's very basic in the sense that if the ball was struck by Frank Lampard and it hit the crossbar, went down, and was, from our perspective as the viewer, clearly over the line. Now, I think a lot of people obviously immediately like, oh, how's the refs not seen that? And I think we forget as a viewer that our difference between our perspective and the perspective of an official on the pitch who is at the ground level is very different. And your ability to be able to judge perspective at that kind of like finite level from about 20 meters away in comparison to us, who's got a top-down view on a broadcast angle, is quite difficult. And I think this kind of leads on to how I think football, and I think a lot of sports saw it a lot sooner. I'm not saying football was resistant to change. I think there was just a lot more pressure for them to be resistant to the change. But they suddenly realized that technology wasn't there necessarily to hinder the officials or kind of overstep the mark, but it was almost to provide them a way of kind of not getting as much like kind of slack as they do get already. And I think this is one of the things I've kind of like, there's a lot of things I've learned from this job coming in, but one of the things that you don't realize as a football fan is just kind of how good these officials are at their job a lot of the time. And we kind of are very quick to kind of jump on them because obviously it's the whole thing with like one bad review equals like 12 good reviews. Like I remember getting told that at my like very first ever job. And it's the same with referees. They can make 20 really good calls and they just make that one bad call and everyone just remembers that. And I think that's what we want. Like that's what I want as a company, is I want to be able to provide them the kind of means to be able to kind of make those decisions when they're unable to. And I think and that one of those like main learning points from it was just that I have a lot more respect for them, and also there's so much more insight you get from just kind of being able to talk to them as well. And you suddenly realize they're actual people. It's shocking. It's a shocking revelation, isn't it, when you find out that Mike Dean actually is another human being who
has feelings,
makes jokes, and and you realize that you're able to talk to him, and it's the same for all of them. And so I think that was like one of the things as well as at Hawkeye. I think a lot of people can see technology is kind of almost trying to take this kind of tradition away from the game, but I know as a company ourselves, we're not there to try and do that. We're there to try and improve the accuracy of the decisions that are being made within this game, and actually to kind of support the guys who are on the field doing it.
This is probably going to be a hard question, and feel free just to not answer it. But has Hawkeye ever got it wrong?
I think that like any football fan is able to kind of already answer that question for me. So they're very, very brief thing with the whole like Aston Villa, Sheffield United last year, where it was just without me going into too much detail, was a 1 in a million, you'd call it, where just every single thing that could possibly go wrong did go wrong. And everyone obviously makes the jokes that we just weren't turned on, and obviously that's it's just it's fair enough. Like we're like, our job is to get that decision correct, and we get that decision correct every other game of the year. And yeah, and so that, and like I've had a lot of people come up to me and kind of say, "Oh, so what really happened?" And I was like, "I swear to God, like what is written on that, like because we like the company put out a tweet at the time. I was like, what is written on that tweet is exactly what happened. Like it's one of those things where it's just every single thing that went wrong. Like just like these cameras are strategically placed, so they're not like getting blocked, and it's just like there's so many things that could have gone wrong, went wrong, and but we've now, the good thing is you learn from those kind of experiences, and you kind of think, oh, that will never ever happen in a million years, and actually it does. And so you then go, okay, well, we now improve. We're a technology company. We're innovating, and we innovate to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And that a really fun thing. And I don't think many people notice it. And this comes back to the whole thing of like, no one ever will ever champion it when you get it right. It's always when you get it wrong. But that exact same goal, the exact same ground, the exact same spot of the goal, another goal line decision happened there about 3 or 4 months later. It's at Villa Park, and same spot in the goal as well, and it was fine again. And so it's just like, oh, so yeah. And I think I guess it's good though in a way, because obviously you don't want to make too much of a big deal of it, because we don't want to make a big deal. It's like, oh yeah, no, we're working. Like, yeah, we are working always. So it's just I thought that was quite like interesting, that it's just like, oh, no one even on broadcast seems to have picked up on this, but which is fair enough. But yeah, so apart from that, like my years and before me, it's fair. It's a really robust system, and it's like it sometimes just absolutely shocks me the kind of things it can do as well. And as you said, like like when it comes to the whole machine learning and just kind of being able to just like, I mean, you've got cameras working at a very high frames per second, and they're able to track this ball 100 times plus a second. Like they're way better than us. We're working with what, 24.25 or something like that? Our eyes are going at. So, but yeah.
So obviously you've mentioned that Hawkeye are branching out into producing graphics and stuff. I'm a huge baseball fan, and I think some of the weird statistics you get from the ball tracking and the StatCast, it's called AWS StatCast. I don't know if you've seen any of that, but what are some kind of obscure stats that you'd love to see more of within football? Let's say, you know, whether that's the quickest speed that someone's run, or you know, some more kind of metrics that you can measure while players are moving around.
Every time it comes to those kind of stats, I think, oh, there's not something that they've not like thought of already that's like going to make me go, what the hell? And then they do it, and I'm like, oh yeah, fair enough, go on. If you could do that, why not? This when I was a kid, I used to be obsessed with like how quick the footballers were running. It's like, oh, who's the fastest footballer in the Premier League? And so obviously, like, I think like if even just like kids, or even most football fans are obviously, that's the kind of stuff. Like, I think America is a really good example of it, because America absolutely love their stats. They hammer at home. Like if you ever watch like the NFL, like all they're ever doing whenever, like between the breaks, especially in the UK where we don't have those ad breaks that they're always having, like just constantly just churning out the stat after stat, like all the numbers, the number crunching, like what this means. And it's like, I think spare, like, you know, the market's like kind of going towards there. And we have another company within the Sony branch called Pulse, or Pulse Live, and they work within the stat space, and that's where we've got new technologies kind of working, and we're kind of working side by side with them to kind of provide those. Interesting on the baseball subject, you may know this, being a avid baseball fan. All the like is it MLB? Yeah, MLB games in the US, all the automated tracking that gets all the like kind of like ball speed data and stuff is all done by Hawkeye, and it's all automated by it's all done as well, like remotely from a global office, which I believe is located in Atlanta. But yeah, so that's again, and it's a weird one. It's a UK company, and it's still to this day, like we've got so far ahead, it can still sometimes feel like a startup, because you're like, oh my god, we're in that sport now, and like every single day you go, like, well, like every month you go into work, like, and you just suddenly got a newsletter of another sport that we just kind of entered into all of a sudden. So it is super interesting. Can't remember if that answers your question, but
I mean, yeah, definitely. So we've talked a lot about Hawkeye itself. Let's talk a bit about Conor Browne. Where's Conor Browne come from? What is your background, first and foremost? You know, Well, how did you get into working for a company like Hawkeye? Because I don't imagine it's the kind of place that advertises in the newspaper.
Yeah. I think it's a really good one. I can't remember the name of the commentator. He was commentating alongside Ali McCoist on an Amazon Live game, and they like one of our operators was went to the pitch side to go sort the referee communications out because we do communications as well for the referees in the Premier League and UEFA, and he was fixing the headset, and then one of the commentators said like, "Can't imagine he ever." It's like, "Can't imagine he grew up wanting to be a VAR engineer." And it's like at the time you're thinking, "Oh, that's really harsh." Like like he's doing a job and he like he enjoys his job. Of course, but then you kind of at the flip side you go, "Well, yeah, of course," because this didn't exist. Like VAR didn't exist like a few years ago, and like yeah, I'm happy to hold my hand up. I wasn't like at 3 years old going, "I want to know where the ball crosses the line. I'm going to make sure that happens." But for me, growing up, I kind of almost I knew what I liked and I knew what I was good at. And I was like, I liked sport. I wasn't necessarily the best at sport, but I really liked sport. And then I also had just a very just genuine knack for like maths and physics. Um, Not necessarily any other subject, just those ones, and just any numbers. I felt kind of like there's a defined answer, so I quite like that. Um, and so when it came to like the decision for like going to university, and I was perpetually in that scenario of like because I think a lot of people who I've listened to a few podcasts and I've listened to a few people. Some people know, don't they, from like a young age of what they want to do. And I got to like age 18 and I'm just still there. Like I've got no clue. Like one minute I want to be a teacher, next minute I want to like kind of like go and just travel, and the next minute I kind of like want to be doing this that. And then I was like sat down one day and I said, right, what do I like? And I was like, oh, well, I really like sport. Okay, right, what am I good at? I was like, okay, quite good at maths and do done like physical education stuff. So how can I put it together? And you're automatically thinking, oh, maybe sports science, biomechanics. So, and then I remember like searching, and I was like, oh, I'm really interested in like kind of Formula One as well. I'm really interested in engineering. So I just typed in like sports engineering just because I thought it'd be funny, just to see what kind of would come up and see. Because there's a degree on Harry Potter. So surely there's a degree on like sports engineering, and it turned out that there was. It was like, and there was a few places that was offering like sports technology. I was like, oh, okay, I'll look into that. And next thing I know, I was like, oh my god, like this sounds perfect because it's a way of using the things that I kind of like I enjoy and things that I'm good at. And when I say good at, I also enjoyed them as well. Because I enjoy I know it sounds quite shallow, but if you're good at something, you do tend to enjoy it sometimes. And so basically got the idea of like, okay, I want to be in sports technology. And then I went to uni and was immediately submerged into all these different opportunities within the kind of sports sector. And I've got people that I worked with that went into footwear development, people who went into kind of the more kind of like programming side of things within kind of like Opta data server and whatnot. And guys who then kind of went on more to the biomechanics side of things, kind of doing motion capture as well. I had a friend who went into the film industry because they were doing a lot of Vicon motion analysis. So it was weird to kind of also see that even then when you go into something that specific, that you could still branch and go horizontal almost. And like and so it then came to I remember like kind of got to placement year and it's like, okay, right, really should be thinking about now like what I want to be doing. And I'd like kind of grown up like really like loving sport. Like my stepdad and my like step grandfather, like who I've like known since I was like 3 years old, like was so into sport, and they like they got me into football from a really young age. And my step granddad was like he was a sports writer for the Times, and so like and he loved his like cricket and tennis, and so they just all these sports getting thrown at me, and one of like and then I remember like kind of seeing Hawkeye kind of appear whilst looking at like placements, like oh that'd be really interesting, and then kind of came to a point where I was like, oh, okay, well, actually, I want to do a master's, so I'm going to just finish my year off, and then I'll do my placement year between my year and my master's. And instead, I finished uni, and I started my master's, and I'd thrown my CV in just because like I'd kind of had that like kind of like like oh well, there's jobs going, so I might as well put my for that. But I'm still doing a master's, and then next thing I know, like getting an interview, and then suddenly I've accidentally like, oh god, I'm doing a master's and a job at the moment. And and then ended up doing them side by side because I'm not giving up that opportunity. But I think the want to work for someone like Hawkeye came from the idea that they were so heavily involved in all these sports I'd grown up with, and they'd made such a difference in like the kind of cricket and tennis, and football was like kind of something that I'd played as a kid, and like it was kind of the main sport that I still was always following. And so I was like, right, okay, well, I know it's getting bigger in football, and I know there's other stuff coming, and like reading into it a lot of the time, there was just like there was just there was so much rumor mill going around, like all the things that were going to be coming in, and it's madness now that we're 4 years later, and a lot of those rumors are now kind of come to like fruition almost. So, but yeah, it's I think it comes back to the whole idea of like a lot of people who might be listening to this are kind of probably still sitting there thinking, listening to your podcast, going, I want to work out what I want to do, and I think even when it came to like when I was like 21 and I still wasn't 100% certain, I think it goes to show that you can get to a point, like don't feel like you're getting to like 16, you need to know. Don't get to 18 and feel like you need to know. Like there's like one piece of advice that kind of helped me, and I'm not necessarily saying it's the most golden piece of advice, but if it comes to that, go, okay, well, what do I enjoy doing? Like, and if you think, oh, well, that's not going to help me get to like maybe like all the money in the world, it's like, yeah, but it's going to give you satisfaction, and job satisfaction sometimes will help you get through a lot more situations than just having money in the bank. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. It's still important to kind of take those things into consideration. I'm not saying that money isn't important, but you do need some of it. But I think there'll be some people who are listening to people who knew what they wanted to do since they're 8, and they're sitting there thinking in their 20s or they're 25 going, I still don't know what I want to do. And in reality, it's all about not necessarily knowing exactly what you want to do, but almost just kind of being able to work out what is going to make, I guess in a very simple way, just bring you joy. Obviously, you're going to have some bad days. It's not like, I'm not saying that's for everyone. I'm sure there's some people maybe who are having good days all the time. I don't know. But like it's where you kind of like you don't go into work thinking, oh my God, I'm going into work again. And that's it. Like that's it every day for like 5 days, 6 days, 7 days a week. And you're just there like, oh, why am I doing this? Like find something that makes you happy and kind of like almost capitalize on that. So hopefully that answers the question.
So when you were a kid, right?
Yeah.
What did you want to be when you grew up? You know, I wanted to be a bin man. Actually, more importantly, I didn't want to be a bin man. I wanted to be the bloke that drove the lorry. You know, what did you actually want to be when you were a kid? And now on reflection, do you think this is the right career path you've actually gone down?
When I was 11, I wanted to be, was it 11? Maybe, no, I was younger. I think I was about 9. My family took me to Florida, and this is kind of like a taboo subject in this day and age, but you know, like SeaWorld, obviously you had blackfish and stuff. So it's like, but at the time, obviously as a 9-year-old, you don't see it that way. You just see it as like, oh my God, there's these amazing animals. And I just remember looking at the killer whales, like, I want to be a killer whale trainer. That's what I want to be. As a 9-year-old, that was like in my head. That was it. And like, if you was like to ask my parents now, like, oh, what did he want to be when he was a kid? They'd probably just say that because it was funny, and also it was probably the most like out of the blue thing. Boils down to wanting to be a marine biologist, and I actually met a couple of marine biologists a couple of years ago, and their job sounded like so cool. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. But I didn't sit there going, oh my God, I should have done that. Like I came out of it thinking that's a really cool job, and I really want to know more about that. But then I got to go back to work, and I didn't it wasn't like I was going back to work and like, oh God, I'm not a marine biologist. So but yeah, and then after that, I'd say the only other thing, like the main, there was so many things I kind of thought about. I think teaching was the other one, and that kind of came from that same conversation with myself of things that I was good at. Like I really enjoyed kind of those eureka moments of teaching someone something and then being able to like it clicking in their head and them going, oh my God, I get it. And I think there was a pivotal moment where I probably could have easily as ended up going into teaching as I did going into this. And I basically sat down like for a few days with some teachers at my school and basically just kind of like spoke it out with them, and was basically come out of them going, right, give something else a chance, because you can always come to this regardless. That they're never going to say no to getting more teachers as long as you're
those that can't do. No, that's not true.
That's exactly. True. And I think that's the thing. I think with teaching, it's such a important skill, and I think I underestimated as well. Like I'm good at teaching, but I'm good at teaching people that want to learn. It's a whole other thing getting people to learn who don't want to learn. And I had some great teachers for that, like, because there were some subjects I did not like to begin with. I went into like secondary school hating history, hated it with a passion. And I came out the other end of it doing a history A level because I just loved it that much, because the teachers that I'd had had convinced me to just like just show, like, they appealed to my learning styles, and they'd kind of like put the time and effort in. And now that I look back on it, I go, I don't think I could have done what they did for me. You know what I mean? So I think obviously people say like, oh, you can't teach, but I think there's a lot of people out there who, like, teachers who are very good at what they do. And it's a shame, because obviously teaching, the only way you can ever measure the progress is just like in like 10 years time and how well they did. Like, I've got like a few teachers. I'll happily name drop a couple, Mr. Walker and Mrs. Hackett, like absolute gems. I still take all the soft skills that I learned from all their lessons as well, like into all my learning approaches for everything as well still. So but yeah, so that's what I want to be, killer whale trainer.
Excellent. If I could hand you my crystal ball right here, and
yeah, can see it.
Yeah, obviously it's right here. Predict the future for me, right? Where do you see projectile tracking technology going? Completely abstractly, you know, I'm imagining, you know, I mean, they already kind of use it for stuff like tracking the space shuttles when they take off, you know, SpaceX, stuff like that. Where do you think that, you know, projectile tracking will go outside of the realms of sport, if there is a potential for that?
So projectile tracking exists in a lot of other industries already. And it already exists in space technologies. It exists in military technologies, amongst a bunch of others that I'm probably not even thinking about at the moment. And so whilst I'm not always kind of able to keep up to date with what's happening there, especially because they're using it for different purposes, and also they're doing it in different manners. The way that we've kind of attacked it from Hawkeye's perspective is that you're trying to integrate with traditional sports and broadcast. And where I see it going, I kind of already know roughly, because I know what the technologies that are kind of coming out. And whilst I can't necessarily, probably some NDAs involved with some of these things, but it's like there are things on the horizon that are going to be using not necessarily just ball tracking, but just like tracking in general and live tracking, and being able to integrate that into the broadcast environment and being able to use that for things. And you've already kind of started to see it happen with like your baseballs, like your automated data kind of being churned out and being sent to these broadcasters, and they're just able to retrieve it like a click of a button. It's kind of being given to the fans directly in real time. And that stuff all starts to become more and more prominent in certain sports. And I'm sure there's people have probably heard like rumor mills of like, oh, surely they'll start to maybe look at things like automatic offsides. And that's kind of where that technology will most likely be heading now. And I can or cannot confirm that technology is already being tested. But that's using things like, you know, your limb tracking and kind of like your ball projectile tracking, kind of knowing those exact points and being able to use all these technologies that already exist, because like we've gone from like being able to define kick points in games to being able to like locate a ball on a pitch to being able to use cameras remotely with so a really good example as well. We have like a department called Smart Production who use like automated cameras to be able to track tennis matches and stuff without like cameramenless operated cameras for like your kind of like lower tiered like matches, because obviously it's not going to necessarily be a camera one for, you know, your main court at like Wimbledon, but you've also got courts like 6 and 7, which especially like coming back to America, they absolutely love their sport and their intake of it. And so like you get India Wells and Wimbledon where they want to be seeing those, like they want to see all their players playing. And so it's like, well, do we have like can they afford to be like sending like all these different broadcast companies with all their different cameramen to kind of like integrate it? It's like, yeah, or we could just ask the technology company that's already here doing all the ball tracking to actually, you know, can you set up a few of your automated cameras to actually just track this for us and just kind of do it all remotely with like joysticks and kind of just screen tracking in general on board projectiles there. So I think that's probably another thing, is like it's already exists, but there's room to improve, I think, is probably what I'm getting at there.
Let's take a break from all the heavy stuff. Let's pull it back a second from all the talk about ball tracking and is it offside, is it onside? And let's get into the really important question, which is Tim's 3 tips. the worst name section of any podcast, and I refuse to change it now because I've made a point of it being terrible. So I will not change it. Obviously, I can't believe that you're my friend, but you have this incredible position of being the training lead for the whole of the UK. I'm sure for greater regions than that for Hawkeye. And you're my age. You're 25, 26. It's kind of blown my mind considering where I am in my life. So what 3 tips would you offer to someone who is in a position of responsibility, regardless of their age? What 3 tips would you say make a good, leader, manager, whatever?
Firstly, Tim's 3 tips. You use alliteration, so you get a point for that. It's like there's some English language students who are
And it's
clapping
3
for
words.
you. Yeah, exactly. See, nailed it. Whether I'll be able to churn out 3 tips, but so with this job, I went into it at 21, and you kind of like you obviously think like in your first year, your 2 years, like you won't be given too much responsibility. Like you'll maybe be trusted to kind of like sit on a computer and do certain things. And within 3 months or 4 months, I was the sole person delivering like a goal line technology, goal line technology system at a Premier League match. It was my first ever game was Watford. And that was crazy because 4 months prior, I didn't know a single thing about this bespoke software. And you just you get thrown into the deep end. And you're like, if I had told myself that was going to happen, I probably would have freaked out. So I don't think I've got, I don't think I'm going to be able to adapt quick enough. I don't think I'm going to be able to learn it in that time. I think one of the things I learned, this is quite cheesy, but is to never underestimate yourself. And that's coming from someone who has done that repeatedly throughout his life, constantly kind of not been able to self-assure and kind of almost back himself when he really should have. And as a result, it's ended in a lot of things that probably, a lot of times where I kind of look back now and go, if I really kind of just trusted my kind of my knowledge at the time, my kind of skill, that I probably would have been absolutely fine. Me and you, we both know each other through snow sports, and I could probably apply that to you obviously you skied, I snowboarded, and in those snowboarding competitions I did, there's probably a lot of times where if I just kind of almost gone to myself, no, you can do this, I probably would have done a lot better in those scenarios. Obviously there's no regrets there, but the main kind of tip I'd say is that because I kind of got forced into this situation at Hawkeye. You kind of almost get put in a position where you have to back yourself, because if you don't, you're going to sink. And I didn't. And then I didn't again the next game, and I didn't again the next game. And then you obviously have those times where you're thinking, and you have the support of your team. It's not like you're just on your own. You have a global support team, and you have kind of those hotlines that you phone if you kind of you need the help. But in reality, I think, and it's probably the thing I probably can't thank Hawkeye enough for, is the fact that they kind of gave me that ability to kind of be almost that, give me that level of independence. And I'm not saying it's easy to kind of back yourself in that manner, but almost kind of when you're having those conversations, I had this once, and it's going to sound really, really I've gone insane. I'd stare into a mirror and just kind of look at yourself, not as yourself, but almost look at it as your best mate. What would you be saying to your best friend who's about to go do the thing that you're about to do? You wouldn't be saying, "Oh, you can't do this. You're not ready for this. You're you don't know what you're doing." You're going to be backing them up. You're gonna be saying something no, 100%, mate. You're just you're way overthinking this. And don't get me wrong, I spoke to friends and I kind of needed them to tell me that as well. But at the end of the day, when you're, and this is probably another good example for anyone who's a football fan, is that when I was 9 months into the job, I did I got given the role of team leading at the new camp for all the Champions League matches. And so I was providing all the UEFA services at the new camp. As a kid, I remember going there on a stadium tour when I was 11, thinking, "Oh my God, it's Barcelona. This is sick." And just suddenly realizing you're providing this huge system that everyone knows about at such big games for such a big club. If you told me that was happening like 9 months prior, I would have just been like, nope, can't do it. I'm gone. I'm not ready for this. I'm an absolute phony. And I think it's just being able to trust yourself and know that you are, if you're putting the work in, that you've got to give yourself more credit. In terms of other tips for responsibility, I'm someone who I'd probably call myself a procrastinator at best. I've perfected the art of doing things. I perfected the art of doing things last minute at university, and I never learned from any of my lessons because no matter how many late nights I pulled, I'd somehow pulled. I would pull through most of the time. Didn't quite happen the same at A level. I had to kind of get kicked up an arse there, but then I went back to sorry. But yeah, when got to uni, got into my procrastinating ways. Then when I started my masters, I suddenly realized I kind of had to, start putting a bit more planning into things, and actually got a bit of a wake up call that I should have kind of taken fully when I was 18, but I didn't. And this probably won't apply to a lot of people who don't have this issue, but there are times that some certain people are going to be kind of thinking, I don't need to do that now. And I think it's almost being able to kind of have that chat with yourself of, actually, do I need to be doing that now? And I'm saying that I don't need to do it now, but really, in reality, am I just saying that because I don't want to do it? And if the answer is I don't want to do it, then you've got to ask yourself two questions. One, okay, if I don't want to do it, why am I doing it in the first place? And two, okay, well then if I like, I think it's like if okay, I know now why I'm doing it. How am I gonna why am I still saying no? And I think that's the kind of, you almost have to address that yourself. I think for procrastinating, it's a weird one. We could do a whole entire podcast, I think, on just procrastination itself. I remember listening to a really, really good TED talk on procrastination. I think if you just type it in, you'll find it. And it's that was actually quite good, because it was just like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is exactly me. And it turned out I was procrastinating by watching this video. The irony did definitely hit me then. And then finally, I think, know if you are in a position of responsibility that someone else has looked at you and gone, they are ready for that. They are ready for that responsibility. If in a work environment, there might be some times in your life you get given responsibility that no one necessarily gave to you. It's just kind of ended up on your lap. That's a bit different. I'll go into the work one first. Someone has given you that responsibility and they believe in you. And especially in a work environment where money is a big, cost factor, they haven't just given you that role because they think, oh, well, if you don't do it, it doesn't matter. Like, they know if you don't do it, it doesn't matter. So they've trusted you with that. And these people have been doing the job for longer than you have. And so they know who the people that are ready for. So in that respect, you kind of almost have to kind of, again, give yourself some credit and go, okay, well, they think I'm good. They think I'm going to be able to do this. So I can do it. Now I just need to kind of, instead of letting the thing that, because there's always that voice in the back of your head that's going to kind of stop you wanting to kind of move forward, because you're like, oh, I'm not ready for this. I can't do it. It's like, oh no, cut that voice out, because someone already knows that I can do this. I don't need to say that I can do it, because they already know that I can do it. So if you're really struggling with you, just know that someone else has told you that you can do it. So it's fine. And actually just focus on the things that, okay, right, so how do I do this? And then look for that advice. And there's always, and it's never bad to ask for that advice as well. I've talked to people within my company and talked with people outside the company. And there are, I mean, if you want to talk to someone who's had a responsibility, just talk, if you can, talk to your parents or your grandparents or someone you like who's got children. They've already had responsibility. I'm not saying necessarily it all equates. I'm not saying me being able to turn on some computers at Barcelona is the same as being able to handle like 20 years of raising a child. But there are people that you can kind of turn to, and don't be afraid and don't feel like you're trapped in that situation. And then, I think and I think that also applies to the other one that I was talking about as well there. When it gets thrust upon you out of the blue.
Conor, fantastic. We're kind of getting towards the end of the show, to be honest. I'm going to try and avoid coronavirus as much as I can, but I'll finish on this one question. You've obviously mentioned going to Barcelona and going to the new camp. What's the craziest place your job has taken you?
Craziest place. Yeah, so for the job, so obviously with UEFA, we travel a lot. And I've been to so many places in Europe now, and it's incredible. That's like I'm so thankful for that kind of opportunity. I've been to Belgrade, I've been to Budapest, I've been to Malmo, I've been to Barcelona, I've been to Villarreal, I've been to Paris with the job, Bordeaux. Oh God, there's so many places. Bern in Switzerland. Oh God, I'm not going to name all of them. There's way too many. But the weirdest one that this country I would never have ever gone to, because I've been to Moscow. I don't think I ever would have necessarily made it to Russia, but I did. I went to Moscow. But there was one place that I'd never thought in a million years I'd ever end up, was Kazakhstan. And that was a huge experience because it went to the capital, which at the time was called Astana. It's now called something different. And obviously you go there and you're thinking as English, no one's going to like you because our country may or may not have been partially, or at least one of our actors may have been partially responsible for creating a certain stereotype over Kazakhstan. And so obviously going there, I thought, oh God, this is going to be awful. But actually, it wasn't bad for that reason. But the one thing you kind of realize going to countries like Kazakhstan is that even in Europe, when we go to France and Spain and stuff, we don't realize how much we rely on people to kind of know our language. Like we kind of think everyone in the world must know English. Like that's the language. That's the one that everyone has to use when they don't know what else to use to each other. Maybe Spanish in certain areas of the world, especially in Latin-based communities. But I think, yeah, with Kazakhstan, no one speaking English. No one, apart from people who were working for UEFA, no one there spoke any English. And so obviously that was like, and this happened really early on in my Hawkeye career. And I remember we got put in this hotel, which turned out to be a nightclub, which we only found out about at 2 a.m. Like on one of the evenings when we were there, we suddenly just heard from the floor below us. And it's like, what the hell? Who's playing music this time? And it turned out there's a huge nightclub downstairs. And yeah, I just remember that whole experience. It was -23. This huge city, this huge stadium that was there. Just kind of felt like it was in the middle of nowhere. We landed in a blizzard as well. I remember landing thinking, if this would never happen in the UK, but obviously they're so used to it. And you could they had a camera at the front of the plane that you could look at. And as we were landing, there was a snow plow just coming underneath and literally timed it so that it's just cleared it as you go down, which is obviously they do it all the time. They know what they're doing, but still you're oh my God. And all you see outside is a snow pelting down. And yeah, that was crazy. Kazakhstan I only got to see Astana, but it was really interesting to kind of be put into that kind of situation, and a country that I never thought in a million years I'd go to. And it was the people there, although necessarily didn't all speak English, the ones that did, that we kind of got to know a bit more, they were really kind to us. And again, just being able to kind of mutually bond over something like football and those kind of technologies was in itself quite beautiful, because you kind of realize that things like sport transcend language sometimes, and actually you're able to, people always argue obviously the kind of people the money that kind of goes into sport, but it provides such a unique experience when you're able to kind of communicate with these other people from around the world. And I've spoke to people from China, people from Japan, people from South America, Brazil, Chile, Peru, even people from the United States of America, who can sometimes be hard to understand. But still these kind of sports, and whether it's football, whether it's this other sports that we're in, and we're able to talk to them about these things this, just always so interested. And I think that's also something I've noticed with this job. If I'm ever at a wedding, you always you have that thing. I don't know if you had this as a kid, whenever you were expected to go talk to people around the wedding, and it's I have nothing to talk to these people about. I don't know who half of them are. Especially with people who like football, as soon as someone finds out what I do, it's that's it. It's like an hour of my day gone because I'm just going to now spend an hour talking to this person about what I do. And I know it probably sounds like I don't like it there, but I do. Like it's good to have that kind of talking point. I don't try to make it about me. I try to like get them involved with the conversation about it and ask them their viewpoints. And I think going into it as well, obviously, I think that big question is are all these should all these technologies be within football or like within these sports? Like, is there room for them? And I think I get a lot of people who kind of with goal line, I think it's fine because I think the ball tracking is kind of like it's fine. It's objective. Like it's either in or it's not in. Obviously, with VAR, there's a lot more subjectivity to it with the referees, and obviously, a lot of people. My friend said it the other day. It was like, like he's an investment banker, and he's like, is it weird that you're hated more than I am now? It's like, yeah, no, I get where you're coming from, because I do get a lot of like kind of like hit back from people, especially like with the VAR side of things, and I think when I talk to them, I try to like kind of make them realize that with the technology is trying to facilitate the best decision possible, and we conduct our technology based upon the rules of the game and the laws that are kind of given to us by individual competitions. Because this might be some people might not realize, like we have between UEFA and the Premier League, for example, we have to implement our technology in different ways because they want to use it in certain ways. So an example of this is in the offside instance, where in the Premier League, offside is even if it's just to the like 1 pixel, if it's offside, it's offside. Whilst in the UEFA, if there's if those lines are kind of like in contact or it's like to the point of like there's like a certain pixel distance or whatever, there's like a discrepancy and there's a what's the word? There's a not a discrepancy, tolerance. Yeah, you'd think being an engineer, I'd be able to come up with the word tolerance. There's a tolerance, and so when that kicks off, even if the line's slightly in front or whatever, they won't give the offside, or they won't reverse the they won't give that offside because suddenly it's just like, oh, okay, well, no, there's too little into it there. And obviously some people in the Premier League are like, oh my god, VAR's ruin everything because they can't even draw a line and they're putting the wrong things. And it's like, well, no, like we're doing it the exact same way that we do it for UEFA, but the difference is how we have to implement that technology and how we have to do it. And obviously things like drawing it off the sleeve, drawing it off the armpit, drawing it off wherever they kind of like deem is the place to be drawing it, like that is dictated to us by the governing bodies of those sports, whether it's the match officials board or whether it's UEFA, whether it's the Premier League. And so as a company, we are not there to try and ruin people's days. We want to make the game as fair as possible. And the way I do believe that we, after a few years as well, especially with something as new as VAR, it will be absolutely fine. And I think people, again, going back to the beginning of this talk, is people always conveniently overlook the good things. There's always a lot of good things because the negative things, when they stand out, they stand out. But and I think this is something you can take into your life anyway, is that just remember that people are very lenient towards always remembering the one bad thing you did when you do 20 good things, but don't let that deter you from continuing to try and do the good things, because they're the things that are making the difference, whether people realize it or not. You're the person doing it and you'll realize it yourself. And I like to think that's what we're doing as well.
Look, Conor, it's been absolutely fantastic to have you on. I'm going to have to blow my whistle for full time now.
That was
unfortunately. That was terrible, but I'm going to allow it. Where can people find out more about Hawkeye? I understand that you might have some positions available, and obviously we'll drop that information in the show notes afterwards. But where can they find out more info if they want to find out more info?
So Hawkeye Innovations, if you type Hawkeye Innovations careers on Google, and you'll find it. I'll drop the URL for you in the for the description. And that's the kind of your main source. Otherwise, probably BBC Sport News is probably also a good place, because I'm sure we'll be talked about at some point. But if you want to learn more about getting into kind of that side of things, like kind of going into systems operations, we don't just do football, we do a lot of different sports. And also if you're a developer, because I work in the product and operation, I work in the operations team, but we also have a product team, development team. So if you're wanting to kind of get into that side of things as well, there positions kind of coming up all the time. If they're not around right now, give it a few months. They do pop up. We're still moving forwards, and I think that's
Well,
it.
good luck with the rest of the season and all your
Thank you very
other
much.
endeavours. I hope it all goes well. Stay safe, and I'll hopefully catch up with you again soon.
Cheers, man. Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you so much to my guest this week, Conor Browne. As you've just heard, he's an extremely busy man. Best of luck to his team as they try and manage a busy schedule this week, trying to organise all of the UEFA Champions League matches. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, why not click up there to find some more of our interesting professions? If you've really enjoyed it, why not consider dropping us a subscribe? You can follow us on all our socials. It's at JobHunterPod on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. Or if you prefer, you can find us on LinkedIn. Just search Job Hunter Podcast. We've got some really interesting episodes coming up, especially next week, which you definitely don't want to miss. Really hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I've been Tim French, and you've been watching the Job Hunter Podcast.